I never thought that I'm going to see Cubans fighting each other in my country.
Protesters pushing for a way out of an economic crisis. And Cuban Canadians are watching from afar, looking at protests they thought they'd never see, while some are calling for the U.S. to lift its economic sanctions on the country to help get it out of its crisis. Thousands participated in rare protests against the government this week as the COVID-19 pandemic is causing some of the worst suffering in decades.
The pandemic, which has been creating economic and social problems everywhere in the world, and particularly in Cuba, because Cuba is dependent upon tourism.
Luis Peral has been living in Vancouver for a decade. He says it's difficult to watch the clashes between Cubans. Police moved in to arrest, sometimes violently, dozens of protesters. But Peral has been checking social media, state-run media, and speaking with friends and family. He says it's largely calmed down, but the situation is still urgent.
Cuba is a small island with limited resources, and our families, our friends, all the population are having really hard times. So I understand that people go to streets to protest.
A group organizing a virtual picket here in Vancouver Saturday believes prosperity for Cubans depends on the U.S. lifting its sanctions on the country.
If you read back to the 60s and read the documents about why the United States government imposed the blockade, it was to strangle the Cuban economy with the goal of making the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban government less popular in order to promote U.S. intervention in Cuba.
Since protests erupted, a petition calling on Canada to pressure the U.S. is growing. It wants to see an end to American sanctions on Cuba. Political watchers say it's a good solution, and top officials are often deployed to areas where protests break out to make this argument.
These problems are not something the government created. These problems were created by the embargo. So it's, again, the machinations of U.S. imperialism that are making us suffer, which is a very effective instrument for rallying nationalistic feeling.
What I really hope is Cuba builds his own country, its own society. And again, the society should be for the majority, respecting the minorities.
In Vancouver, Crystal Laderas, City News.